With the Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow remakes, it has given us a very unique opportunity because in the Pokemon Direct that we had, they announced that there's going to be transfer from those Pokemon Virtual Console games into Pokemon Sun and Moon. This means that we're going to have first generation exclusive movesets for effectively the first time in like a serious competitive environment, as well as just in a modern era of Pokemon games on different devices. So on your screen right now, you're going to see the 50 TMs that are available in the first generation, that some of them aren't really available currently, or some of them are very useful and we can still make use of that as we transfer over into the 7th generation games. So I was just going to kind of cut out the ones that are fairly unnecessary, unusable. However, it does leave us with some very, very unique potential movesets, and let's just get into this list with Whirlwind being a TM, and the most exclusive Pokemon for this one is going to be Zapdos. Now, here's the thing about Zapdos. In competitive play or just using it as a tank, it can be a very, very annoying Pokemon because it just has roosts, so that way it can heal up, it can go full defensive. Now, it does have a lot of weaknesses, but Whirlwind gives it the opportunity to phase. So if an opponent is setting up against Zapdos to try to overcome its tankiness, well, that's not going to happen because you can Whirlwind it, and if you have a Stealth Rock set up or something like that going on, your opponent's going to have a very bad time because they can't get any momentum. You Whirlwind, you heal, you Whirlwind, you heal, then you can try to get Thunder Waves across the entire team. This is actually going to be a very devastating moveset. I feel that it's quite overlooked with how people are kind of just immediately thinking, oh my god, TM Fissure for No Guard Machamp, which we will talk about in a couple more TMs. Next up, we have Horndrill. Now, Horndrill is going to be available on Dragonite, as well as a few other Pokemon that don't have normal access to it. Now, Dragonite isn't going to become this super OP busted Pokemon because of Horndrill, but it's actually pretty neat to see that we can get it on this Pokemon. Now, also, when I'm doing this list, I'm not going to go over every Pokemon that gets every part of that TM. I'm just kind of talking about the more notable Pokemon. If you want to investigate more, go onto Bulbapedia, go onto Cerebi, just look up the first generation TMs, and then see which Pokemon get it, and you might be surprised. So next up we have Body Slam. Now, an interesting one about Body Slam is that Tauros is going to get access to it, and that can actually work out with an Anger Point moveset or something, because an interesting side effect about Body Slam that came on in recent generations is that if you use Body Slam after the opponent has minimized, it has perfect accuracy and the damage is doubled. So you can actually use like an Anger Point Tauros as some kind of combo, or if your opponent is spamming Minimize, well, you can actually have Tauros get just a little more viability against those annoying strategies. Also, Body Slam has a 30% chance to paralyze. With that 30% chance, some cool things could happen, which is why we're also going to talk about Kangaskhan. So Mega Kangaskhan gets access to Body Slam as well because of this first generation, and that could lead to some interesting high paralysis chances, because Body Slam is going to apply twice, and those effects are also going to have two 30% chances to paralyze your opponent. So this would be good in situations where Return is already going to be a 2-hit KO, and Body Slam could effectively be a 2-hit KO as well. So if you don't want to worry about taking too much recoil from the double edge or something like that, and you're not looking for direct one-shots, you know, Power Punch into a Body Slam could turn into some good damage right there, and it could be a little better of an option compared to Return if you are going for status, or maybe even a tankier Kangaskhan that could be more frustrating than just trying to nuke the opponent. Okay, so another cool thing about Body Slam is that this is a move tutor from Fire Red, Leaf Green, Emerald, and XD Gale of Darkness, because we can actually see that there's a lot of first generation TMs that they weren't reintroduced for a later generation, so they became a move tutor for the third generations, and then they were scrapped completely for future generations. So actually we're kind of seeing that come back now. So all you have to do is kind of look at the Pokemon that get Body Slam. Not a ton of notable ones in the third generation. Alright, next up we have Bubble Beam. Now, people wouldn't really expect Bubble Beam to have too much competitive integrity, but you give it to Articuno, and now Articuno has a more powerful Water Pulse, technically. So the interesting thing is, if you want to give Articuno Water-type attacks, Water Pulse was the only option. Does have that chance to confuse, which is pretty nice, but if you want a little more damage, 5% more base power on that Bubble Beam, and if you're going for super effective hits, technically 10%, so a little bit more damage. Just a better water-type option for Articuno in the end. And also, some really interesting Pokemon do get a hold of Payday. So Payday isn't going to be a super competitive move, but it is really fun to think about that if you have like a high-level Pokemon. You know, you get a level 100 Pokemon in the game from using the Missingno Glitch, get a ton of rare candies, get a level 100 any of these Pokemon on your screen, and they can learn Payday, and then you can make a little bit of cash for your game, because I just like the idea of Payday. It's free money, and at the end of the battle, you pick up some cash, and you're good to go. So these Pokemon get access to it, and that's some pretty fun stuff. Next up, we have Seismic Toss, yet again a move tutor that returned, but we haven't seen again, and quite a lot of Pokemon get access to the Seismic Toss. Now, you'd really have to check out the list to see if a Pokemon that you're interested in gets access to it, because I mean, Blastoise getting access to the Seismic Toss could be really good on a tanky set, and there's also Pokemon like Mew and even the Mega Slowbro that can have reliable damage options. Now, the problem that I found when looking at tanky Pokemon that want to be using the Seismic Toss, or at least find a damage option, Pokemon like Mega Slowbro, they can use Calm Mind and just get more damage off of a Scald. Mew can also like Will-O-Wisp and Burn, and then like find other sources of damage that could work out really well. So overall, it's not going to be like a massive damage source, and not a lot of Pokemon are going to be able to make use of it, unfortunately, but it is still a pretty solid option. And if there's a Pokemon that you like, you know, if you just want to run an old school anime Charizard, you can give it that Seismic Toss, and some fun stuff might end up happening because of it. So next up, we have Rage. Now, Rage is very interesting because all first generation Pokemon that can learn TMs learn Rage. This is where things start getting interesting because it's like a power punch in a way. That the way that Rage works is that whenever you take damage, it's going to raise your attack stat by 1. Power Punch on a slower Pokemon kind of does the same thing, because you take damage, then you use Power Punch, deal a little bit of damage, and then you gain the attack stat from that. So it's kind of like a tankier Power Punch for almost every Pokemon. So if you're going on a really sustain heavy Pokemon, or you have some kind of setup going for you, you might consider the Rage, you know, use it twice, heal up, and now you're at +2 attack on a Pokemon that normally wouldn't have these options. So a lesser Power Punch, but it's good for a Pokemon that doesn't get Power Punch in general. And now we're on to the big boys. Let's talk about Fissure. Right now in my game, I am grinding for Machops and Machokes to get as many of them with Fissure as possible. Because one thing that we don't know is when we transfer our Pokemon to Pokemon Sun and Moon, how are the IVs and natures and everything going to be decided? So my goal is that I'm going to go and catch a ton of Pokemon and just kind of hope for the best. Maybe they'll give all these transferred Pokemon +2 like free maxed IVs, maybe even +3 on those. So that could be really good, and if I have a ton of them, I might get the right nature, I might get the right ability, and then I can have a super awesome competitive No Guard Machamp, so we can go with that. Other Pokemon that get Fissure that might be interesting, Blastoise, Onix, aka Mega Steelix, and then we even have the Mega Slowbro as well. So if you want to run a very frustrating, tanky kind of Pokemon setup, you can do that. You know, if you're going up against a physical attacker that's not hitting you super effective, you can definitely use Steelix to find those KOs on Fissure, and you can maybe just play a lot of other really fun things. Also, we have Mind Reader Fissure on the Poliwrath, which is pretty crazy. Now, this was in Pokemon Stadium 2, I believe, and because of that, now we can Mind Reader Fissure if we are alive that long. Say we have Tailwind, you know, use a lead Pokemon with Reflect Light Screen to try to give Poliwrath that survivability, maybe even Tailwind. We can go into Mind Reader Fissure combos, and that could be pretty interesting. So there are quite a few things in our favor right now when we're talking about this, and yeah, more Pokemon getting Fissure, more Pokemon doing things, but that No Guard Fissure Machamp, always landing that Fissure under a Choice Scarf, it could change the game depending on how it goes. Now, we don't, for all we know, we're going to get trolled by Game Freak, and they're not going to make it to where it can have like the No Guard, but something happened, and it's going to be pretty cool is what I'm saying. Alright, next up we have Mimic. Now, Mimic is again a TM that all Pokemon that can learn TMs can learn Mimic, and it is even a Fire Red Leaf Green move tutor, so another massive Pokemon TM that is going to be access to everything. Now, when every Pokemon can get access to Mimic, that technically means all first generation Pokemon have access to any move in the game in double battles. So all you have to do is kind of just rig it to where, you know, you use a move, then you get to mimic that move, and then you can support it. And now all first generation Pokemon can use this in current competitive play. So that means when we get the Pokebank and all that transfer, all that potential will be around for the 7th generation. So I haven't really thought about any super sick combos. There's honestly an overwhelming amount of things to think about. But if you've played around with Mimic, or you have a lot of like theory crafting going on with this, please comment down below. Also leave a like on this video if you've liked it so far. How you feel like what Pokemon can get a super busted move that it really needed access to that you can maybe get going with the Mimic. On recent Fan Fridays, we saw that you can give Mimic on Furfrou and find some success, so why not any of the first generation Pokemon as well? Next up we have Reflect, and again, Reflect, a ton of Pokemon can learn it, and the interesting thing about Reflect in this situation is that it's actually a TM in future generations, but the first generation Pokemon get access to it that don't get it later. Like, as we can see here, you know, Venusaur, Charizard, Blastoise, all these Pokemon get access to Reflect in first generation, but they don't get it in future generations when Reflect is brought back as a TM. Then we can see that, you know, Clefable, Wigglytuff, these Pokemon still hold on to it. So there are some really interesting Pokemon that have access to the Reflect now. A couple that I was thinking about is, if we look at it, all the evolutions. So if you want to run a supportive evolution team in doubles or triples, you can actually give Reflect to Vaporeon, Jolteon, or Flareon. Reflect Jolteon, that's going to be a very fast Reflect. Even though Jolteon isn't a super tanky Pokemon, you can cheese in some kind of status right there, or some kind of supportive things for your team. And same with Porygon. Give Porygon 2 Reflect. It's already a huge, beefy, tanky Pokemon that can work out. And same with Aerodactyl. Aerodactyl is really fast. And even though it's not super durable, you know, you give it the Reflect, it might be able to survive that hit that was headed for it, catch your opponent off guard, you buy yourself a turn, and then you have free Reflect on your field. That could be pretty cool. So, not like an overwhelmingly powerful kind of thing, but at least some other options coming out of a very, very weird TM scenario on that Reflect, with a ton of Pokemon getting access to it. And then we get to talk about Explosion, which is really weird because this is like an anti-TM kind of thing, at least on Magnemite Magneton. They did not receive it in the first generation, and now that Explosion is a TM currently, they get access to it. Now, it doesn't make a huge difference because Magnezone doesn't do huge amounts of physical damage on that Explosion. Just something really weird to talk about. And on Snorlax, the only way that Snorlax can get self-destruct is through breeding, but you need a Munchlax that was on the Pokewalker, where you got it like the self-destruct Munchlax, and then you bred it into the Snorlax. So, very difficult to get, but now it's just going to be easier. You catch a Snorlax in game, you pretty much have to fight one for the storyline. So make sure you catch that one, give it self-destruct. Now you have a more breeding-ready Snorlax for when we transfer in 7th generation. Easier self-destruct Snorlax, while not being something completely exclusive. And then we have Metronome. Metronome battles are pretty cool, so now we can actually set it up to where more Pokemon have access to the Metronome because of this. You know, you can give it to Snorlax, Magmar, Electabuzz, all kinds of Pokemon that don't normally have access to Metronome. Actually, giving it to Machop is actually a cool idea if you think about it, because now you have a Machamp that can Metronome any move, and it's not going to miss because of No Guard, so it could be a little fun dynamic for the Metronome battle. Same on Alakazam. Just a lot of really cool options right there, and again, was a move tutor, was brought back, and for the most part, the same Pokemon get it. So, yep, just a current 7th generation usable Metronome on a lot of Pokemon. Metronome battles are fun. Go have fun with that. So that is the end of this list right here. Now, some people might be wondering, well, I only get one of the TM. How am I going to make this work out? That's where I came up with the brilliant theory that maybe the Missingno Glitch was left intentionally to kind of aid in this competitive growth. That we know we're getting access to movesets we haven't seen in almost 15, 20 years, you know, when we think about it. And because of that, that means we can actually use the Missingno Glitch, get an infinite amount of TMs, teach that to any Pokemon that we want to, and now we can kind of make these Pokemon competitive in the first generation, bring them over to the 7th generation, and we're going to be good to go. Also, maybe the breeding mechanics might change. Maybe if the Pokemon can learn it ever, even through events, even through older TMs, even through outdated kind of tutor moves, it can be bred down. So that could be very helpful as well. We don't know what's going on with the 7th generation, but if you guys enjoyed this video, just kind of giving a look at some of the cool TM breakdowns that we can get from the first generation, and just kind of spam TMs from Missingno, get a No Guard Fissure Machamp, and then go and win more battles, because that is absolutely terrifying to think about. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you all have a nice day. Thank you for watching.